So listen to this. In 1996, Harry Redknapp was giving a press conference with a young Frank Lampard sitting beside him when a West Ham fan raised his voice and straight up told him that you only play Frank because he's your nephew. You let Scott Canham and Matt Holland go for peanuts, but you keep your boy around just to give him free publicity. And when Redknapp hit back by telling him that Scott Canham couldn't even make the team now that he was at Brentford, the fan told him he was lying. After that, Redknapp looked him dead in the eye and told him, "I promise you there will be no comparison between what Scott Canham and Frank Lampard will achieve in football. There is no favoritism here. At most, I make his life harder. I didn't want to say this in front of him, but I will tell you now, Frank will go to the very top, right to the very top." Indeed, Scott Canham will be playing for Chesham United, an amateur side in the 7th tier just 2 years later. However, when it comes to Frank Lampard Jr., I regret to inform you that the West Ham fans would never truly change their minds about him. Look, I get it. Football was created by the poor and stolen by the rich. There's nothing football fans hate more than seeing some posh kid take the spot of someone much more talented. And when it came to Frank, it all reeked of nepotism. In a 1990s world dominated by the stereotype that footballers were all grunts who could barely read, this was a boy who had grown up in a private school as an honor student, in his own words, the only footballer who can speak Latin, only ever playing for his school's team and dividing his time between football, cricket and bowling, until his father, Frank Lampard Sr. and his uncle, Harry Redknapp, two former West Ham players, took over the club as assistant coach and first-team manager and immediately brought him into their academy, promoting him to the first team the very next season and only sending him on a 6-month loan to Swansea before giving him his Premier League debut. Yeah, I think we can all understand why the fans would have a hard time believing this was rightfully earned, but this time, the Nepobaby, as the kids say, would turn out to become the best midfielder on the planet, though surely not thanks to the support of any West Ham fans. I mean, sure, if you look up anything written about him at the time, you'll mostly find descriptions like all floppy hair and sideways passes, or podgy, too slow, not the worst, but certainly not very gifted. However, the fans, they took it too far. Every time he stood up for a warm-up, chants rained down onto the pitch telling him to sit back down, calling him Daddy's boy or most famously Fat Frank. They raved about how he was lazy and out of shape, which is hilarious because even though he was certainly a chubby kid, after a couple years being mocked by other players for going on runs wearing a trash bag over his tracksuit, he had clearly sweated off all the excess weight, and yet even Terry Brown, the club's chairman, accused Redknapp of only subbing him in to get his nephew some appearance bonuses. And still, what truly broke Lampard's relationship with the club was when, in a match against Aston Villa, he broke his leg and the fans cheered and applauded. In his own words, they made me feel sick to my stomach. It got to the stage when I actually thought about leaving football behind. I would rather work a 9 to 5 than take abuse from 30,000 people every week. But he didn't. Instead, 5 months later, he made it back, jumped in as a sub and scored the winning goal. A couple months later, he was already getting his first hat-trick, even being called up to the England under-21s. And only a year later, he had West Ham up to 5th place, their highest ever Premier League finish, for the first time in their history, earning them a place in the Intertoto Cup, where Lampard proceeded to score the goal that put them in the semis, then scoring the opener there and the equalizer in the final, as they came from behind to secure a place in the UEFA Cup. Suddenly, Daddy's boy was being called up to the national team, having scored more goals for the under-21s than anyone before him, aside from Alan Shearer. By the end of that year, the center midfielder was West Ham's 3rd highest goal scorer, and no matter what, the fans remained unimpressed. Every single match, the same routine went down and Lampard began daydreaming about leaving, so when they fell down to 15th place, leading to the shocking departure of both his uncle and his father, he didn't just follow their lead, he went looking for revenge. He could have joined Leeds United, gotten to play Champions League football and fought for the title alongside his old friend Rio Ferdinand, but instead, he went with West Ham's city rivals, Chelsea, who had only ever made it to the UCL once and hadn't won the league since the 50s. As he'd go on to reveal, once at Chelsea, every time West Ham lost, I would smile. That's how deeply they hurt me. I wanted them gone. However, it soon realized that they weren't his only doubters. Lampard arrived at Chelsea in a €16 million deal that made him their second most expensive signing ever, only behind Hasselbank, which, for a guy who hadn't been called up to the national team since his debut 2 years prior, meant a lot of questions being raised by the fans, especially once he went his first 5 months at the club without a single league goal, only ever really making headlines when just a few weeks after his debut he was kicked out of a hotel alongside John Terry and Gudjohnsen for being drunk and throwing peanuts, laughing and shouting at an American couple who were crying as they watched the news broadcasts of 9/11. Yeah, for 2 years Lampard was moved around by Ranieri, serving as a jack of all trades as they desperately tried to get any return on their transfer market investments, only to reach the end of his second year in such a desperate state financially that, by their final and decisive game against Liverpool, according to some sources, the board had decided that if they lost and failed to get Champions League qualification, Lampard would have been one of the first players to be sold. But not only did they win, a couple months later, as one newspaper wrote, billionaire Roman Abramovich parked his tanks in London and began firing off £50 notes. In the blink of an eye, €100 million in signings arrived at the club, and now, if the already 26-year-old Lampard wanted to keep a place in the team, he'd have to fight Makelele and Veron for it. The clock was well and truly ticking, and, to put it quite simply, this scared them straight. Even better, for the first time ever, with a guy like Makelele behind him, Lampard could go forward as much as he wanted without worrying about defensive duties, and the result was phenomenal. Right in September, he was named the League's Player of the Month. 30 days later, he had done it again, and by the end of the year, he was on 23 goal contributions, only missing out on the League's Player of the Season award because of Thierry Henry. Not to mention that England wasn't just calling him up for the Euros, they were benching Paul Scholes in order to play him, and while he casually scored against France and Croatia, as well as the extra time equalizer to force Portugal into a penalty shootout, making it into the team of the tournament even if they get knocked out then and there, well, back in London, Abramovich had replaced Ranieri with a manager who was, as they used to say, quite special. The moment Mourinho stepped into the Chelsea locker room and saw Frank Lampard, he decided he was his chosen one. He brought him to the side and straight up told him, a year ago Deco was the same player he is now, but no one knew. I made him the European Footballer of the Year. You are just as good as Zidane, Vieira or Deco. You are the best player in the world. Now, you just have to prove it. And those were the magic words that brought Frank Lampard to life like a dormant CIA operative. With a world-class manager and a team built around him, Lampard's numbers blew up to a new level never before thought possible by anyone close to him. By April, not only had he scored against Barcelona and put 3 goals past Bayern Munich, he was topping the Premier League assist charts and even giving some of the country's top strikers a run for their money when it came to goal scoring. So much so that with 4 matches left to play, only a year after Arsenal had won the league without a single defeat, he already had Chelsea 1 win away from the title. And of course, it was there that he decided to put down one of his greatest ever performances. Finding the team struggling to break through already 1 hour deep into the game, grabbing onto a lost ball, bullying the first defender onto the ground, going past another and smacking it in, before ending it all 15 minutes later by running the whole length of the pitch in a single counter-attack and having the audacity to dribble past the keeper before putting down the goal of the title. 50 years later, he had made Chelsea champions of England again, and he had done it while putting down 41 goal contributions from midfield, being named Player of the Year by everyone except, ironically, the FA itself, carrying that form straight into the following season, taking the Community Shield and putting down 12 goal contributions over the next 14 matches, leading Chelsea to the greatest Premier League start in history, and getting Mourinho to outright name him as the best player in the world, which was extremely timely as the Ballon d'Or and FIFA World Player of the Year voting had just closed. So when the rankings were revealed, there he was. Frank Lampard was second place in both, only second to Ronaldinho, and that man not had one of the greatest seasons of all time. We might actually be talking about Frank Lampard, West Ham reject, alleged Nepobaby and Ballon d'Or winner. In fact, even after receiving such an and honor, Lampard still could not let go of his grudge against them, claiming that, now that I'm a runner-up for World Player of the Year, I'm sure my critics will have a much harder time explaining their feelings towards me. However, if he thought the challenges of the past had been hard, he had no idea what was coming for him. After finishing off that year with a second Premier League title, once John Terry went out with a back injury, Lampard had to take on the captain's armband as Chelsea watched Ronaldo and Rooney snatch the title from them, and as much as Lampard himself went on one of the most legendary FA Cup runs in history, getting 7 goal contributions for the first 3 rounds before putting down a brace to force Tottenham into a tiebreaker, scoring in the semis and assisting the winner in the final in extra time against United, that just wasn't enough to save Mourinho's job. Abramovich was up to a point where he saw complete dominance as the bare minimum, and so by September, Mourinho was gone. Alone, only a month later, Lampard was being booed off the pitch as England missed out on qualification for the Euros. Then came the injury, 47 days and 14 matches out, and above all, as he desperately tried to claw his way to the Champions League title, scoring and assisting 2 in the last 16, and then scoring and assisting another to seal their place in the semis. Only days later, his mother suddenly fell ill and was sent to the hospital in critical state. As he worried about what may happen to her, he still dragged himself to the pitch for the first leg against Liverpool, but 2 days later, she passed. Even then, not only did he show up for the second leg, he scored in extra time, pointing to the sky in what could hardly be deemed a celebration, and ultimately leading his team to the final where, unfortunately, yet another goal did not prevent him from watching his old friend Terry slip, miss, and kill their title hopes. Still, all throughout this, Mourinho called him, and I quote, every day, every single day, offering the now UEFA Midfielder of the Year a way out of England alongside him at Inter, as he claimed he just couldn't accept the idea of looking up and not seeing his mom in the stands of Stamford Bridge. But in the end, he remembered she had once told him to never forget what these fans had given to a West Ham boy moving across London, so instead, he rejected Mourinho's offer and vowed to not leave Chelsea until he could bring them the Champions League title. So, in a season where still dealing with grief, he had to watch his name get dragged through the mud in between a divorce and a managerial merry-go-round, Lampard still hit 40 goal contributions. The next one, he actually started off on a dry streak, but then, like clockwork, he began firing them off, hitting 15 goal contributions in just the final 11 games of the season, clutching the Premier League title on a final day, and hitting a career high, 45 goal contributions in total, 27 of them being goals, the all-time record for a midfielder. In his own words, I was in a daze. After my mom, I couldn't bear to think of anything else other than football. I was one-track minded, no highs, no lows, and oddly enough, that made it easier to play. At 33 years of age, after all of what happened, Lampard had hit such highs that even Mourinho had him back on speed dial trying to make him his first Real Madrid signing. But, as you may imagine, he said no, because he still had a Champions League to win. After that famous ghost goal for England, Lampard's international career virtually came to an end, and rather unceremoniously. To make it all worse, he was then hit with 4 more months on the sidelines, and out of nowhere, he began feeling under pressure to leave the club as well. But as the rumors that the end of the Lampard era was near went around while more managers treated Stamford Bridge like a revolving door, without bringing much attention to himself, Lampard began plotting. After a 3-1 defeat to Napoli in the last 16, he showed up with a goal and assist to force the game into extra time and allowed Drogba to finish the job. Then, in the quarters, he added another goal against Benfica, and now the questions were being raised. How was a club who could barely hold on to a manager in the Champions League semi-finals? Well, the answer to that hit every pundit in the face when they all claimed they would stand no chance against Guardiola's Barcelona, only to watch Lampard bully Messi off the ball and play it to Ramirez, who'd assist Drogba for a first leg 1-0 win. Then, going into the second leg by conceding 2 and losing Terry to a red card within 44 minutes, only to again witness Lampard playing a magical through ball to Ramirez, who'd chip Valdez to level the aggregate score, allowing Fernando Torres to finish off their miracle in injury time, hugging him in sheer euphoria as Chelsea made it back to the Champions League final. where, of course, with Terry suspended, Lampard figuratively and literally captained his team to glory, holding off two of the markers as Drogba headed in the equalizer, eventually stepping up for the shootout itself as Chelsea were down 3-1, extending their lifeline just enough so that Schweinsteiger and Olic could miss, making Chelsea champions of Europe. After that, nothing else mattered. The next season, 3 assists from Lampard within 3 games put Chelsea through to the Europa League final, which of course they'd win. A few more goals made him Chelsea's all-time top scorer again from midfield. And after a late reunion with Mourinho, Lampard was sadly pushed away to Man City, eventually retiring in the MLS as the Premier League's 4th highest ever goal scorer. Not a single winger had ever managed his way into the top 10, and somehow, now, a midfielder was up to 4th. That, ladies and gentlemen, is Frank Lampard. Simply unprecedented.